And we are live. Okay, welcome to Q&A day 2. So again, my name is Megan Peters. You guys should all know who I am right now. But today with me, I have two wonderful panelists, and we're going to talk about today's tutorials, but also any questions that you guys have about modeling and the modeling process. And so we can do some brief introductions, and then I'm going to do a quick poll to start. So actually, I'm going to put this up while we do the introductions. And so you guys take a look at the polls button at the bottom of your screen. So I just want to see, we talked a lot about the train illusion today, and I want to see whether anybody has ever experienced this. So go ahead and click buttons while we do some introductions. And so now we can have an introduction from Hong. Hong, can you tell us about you?
Sure. Let me share the screen.
Sure, yeah.
So,
yeah, awesome. Here, so let's make that big. Perfect.
Okay, I'm an assistant professor at Peking University, and I use modeling, of course, but I also use behavioral and neural imaging experiment to extend human cognition and decision making. And what I'm really interested is to reinterpret classical psychological and behavioral phenomenon from a decision theoretic approach. That means everything is decision making. So a few keywords: Bayesian decision theory, uncertainty, probability, distortion, perception, action, attention, decision making, and bounded rationality. So basically, I'm interested in modeling human higher cognition, like how people decide, and visual and motor uncertainty, as well as in economic decision and risk.
Awesome, thanks. And actually, this is really exciting for me because Hong and I don't think if we've ever met in person, it was, a completely different life before COVID. But Hong, you and I have a lot in common in our interests. And so I think this is going to be a really fun discussion today where we talk about visual and vestibular signals and everything. Yeah, it's going to be cool.
Oh, actually, I found you and Larry Maloney had taught a summer school together before.
That's right.
I did a postdoc with Larry Maloney.
Okay, well, there you
that's
go.
Why I'm so familiar.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I actually, last year at Cosmo, which is one of the summer schools that was also co-founded by Gunnar Blom and Paul Schrader and Conrad Cording, who also helped co-found Neuromatch Academy. And I was an instructor at Cosmo with Larry, and Larry was a wonderful person to teach with. So now it all makes sense. Yeah, Larry was lovely. That was great. Cool. Okay, so C, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, so my name is Si Wu. I'm also from Peking University. So I don't know why today two panelists from the same university. Okay, anyway, my background is theoretic physics. After graduation, I changed to computational neuroscience. I'm interested in a lot of stuff of modeling and computational stuff in computational neuroscience, like neural population coding, continuous attractive neural networks, and Bayesian theory, multi-sensor integration, anyway, a lot of stuff because I have been in this field for many years, more than 20 years. And recently, I'm also working on some brain-inspired computing. So try to apply some models and algorithms we found in the neural system, try to apply to solve some applications. So this is my first time. I'm very happy to attend this neural match discussion.
Yeah, I think this will be really fun. So I'm seeing that we've got some echo going on. So I'm going to try muting a couple people, but when you want to talk, can you unmute yourself? And then that way maybe we can kill the echo. It's only when Hong and Megan are speaking. I hear it too. Okay, see, I'm going to mute you.
Okay.
And we'll see, is this better? Are we getting echo now? Are we okay? All right, I think we may have fixed it. So C, unfortunately, we're gonna have to keep you on mute but unmute yourself and jump in, okay? All right, cool. Super. So let's take a look at the poll briefly, just to kind of get you guys thinking about the illusion that you talked about today and the tutorials. And so in the poll, we're asking, have you ever experienced the train illusion? And did you wonder why it happened? And it looks like most people are saying yes, and I totally thought I knew the answer, but now I am not so sure. And that's great, because that means that the models that we are talking about today and the model that we talked about today, which sort of got it right, but didn't quite get it right, maybe gets you kind of thinking about why some models work better than others. How about you guys, Hang and C, have you guys ever experienced the train illusion?
Well,
like the most
not much.
Not much? No, really? So when like you're sitting on the train, you don't like, and like the train next to you starts to move, you don't feel like you're moving. Maybe you have a very strong vestibular sense.
Well, the truth is, the last time I took a train, well, not very, a few months ago, maybe last year. So, but now we don't have like many trains coming together. So when I'm trained, I just did not notice.
True. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a couple people in here who have never experienced the train illusion at all. So for those of you who said I've never experienced, next time you are on a train, you're in a station, like see if this happens to you. I think it'll be really interesting. All right, cool. So before we get into the interesting questions that you guys are all asking right now, I think that it would be good if we do our reflection. So I have also figured out how to share my screen. Sorry about the tech difficulties yesterday, everybody. But I'm going to go ahead and share this now so that we can do our reflections. And I think this will do it. No, that's not it. Sorry. Give me 1 second. Technology. It's always difficult. All right. Here, how about this? Okay. So we've got this going. So you guys have seen this slide maybe before, and if you've watched some of the other videos. But what we want now is, again, to take just a couple minutes to really think about, have you experienced the illusion? You thought you knew the answer. What have you learned now today that you didn't know before? And so we'll put the links in the chat as well. And so if someone wants to retype those links into the chat, then I don't have to do it. That's great. Or you can go find this information on NeuroStars. And so I'll remind you that if you have your interactive students link here, you can go there, and then that'll give you the information here. There's going to be like some surveys and information that's there. So let's type these into the chat, and then we can do just a couple minutes here where we think about today's lesson and today's like tutorials, which were a lot more theoretical than the ones that we did before. So I'm going to type these into the chat here. And if anyone wants to do the observer one, then you can do that for me, and I don't have to type both of them. So let's do that. Please go there. And as you guys may have remembered before, from yesterday, these are really important because they also help us take a temperature on how you guys are doing, how you guys are getting along, whether you're, having fun, having a good time. And so I think, please just take a couple minutes to do that. And then we can kind of get going on chit-chatting about some of these questions here if you want. Hang and C, you guys can also see the questions if you click the Ask a Question box. And so we can pick some of these and go through them. And we usually start kind of at the top, and we'll see which ones, get upvoted, and we can go from there. But let's take a moment here to read through a couple of these. You guys are all doing your reflections, right? I hope. Can you say yes in the chat if you're doing your reflections, so I know that you're there? We want to make sure that you guys are having a good time. So please do this. Anybody home? Yeah, cool. All right. So sweet. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So it looks like we have a couple good questions here. This is great. And you guys can jump in and answer questions too. Like it's not totally my job. The whole point here is that we're going to have a really fun discussion. So,
so should we go from the highest vote question?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's give the students just a couple more, like one more minute to do their reflections. It's a real short survey, but we just want to make sure that they're having a good time. And so these surveys, just so you guys know, these surveys, we're asking them to think about the knowledge that they came into the day with, and then the knowledge that they left the day with, and kind of to compare them and see what's different and how it's changed, and how maybe you can apply this knowledge to the questions that they want to answer in their science. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on some of these questions. So let's start at the top.
So I cannot say the question. Is that right?
Oh yeah, if you click on the Ask a Question button at the bottom, you'll be able to see them.
Oh, okay. There are 11 questions now. Okay.
Yeah. So let's do the first question. Why the vestibular signal is an acceleration, not a voltage like an optic signal. So this is a question about representations. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to take down the slides here so we're big. Again, is that okay, guys? We can take down the slides. And so the first question is, why is the vestibular signal an acceleration, not like a voltage? So this is really about kind of what what it's representing, and not so much like the actual raw signal, right? So it probably is like, actually a voltage, in the sense that the neurons are actually coding, they're actually spiking, like this is actually like information that is being passed by typical neural signals. But it's about how it's interpreted by the brain. Do you guys have any thoughts about that type of question?
Well, I don't consider myself as a perception person, more like a decision-making person. So decision-making is about to get signals and integrate the signals. But for this question, I just have some like lay person thought. Like, I think our perception or sensory motor systems, they have the representations is just mirror the outside world. It's like for vision, visual world is a map. And we have all kinds of references. So you can have, say, when you move, you have, here is the train and here's the window. So you have references, but for vestibular signal, I don't think we have such references that's there. And it's something that naturally come with like change, and also probably, I don't know what's cause and what's effect, but if it's noisy, then it probably makes little sense to accumulate it. And more is like instantaneous signal. So that's kind of lay person thought.
Yeah,
Not sure whether it's answer.
I think the point of these questions too, like we want to answer the questions, of course, guys, like we want to answer your questions, but we also want to chat a little bit about what they mean in the bigger picture framework. See, did you want to? I'm muting you. Sorry, I keep.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. I open by myself. Okay. Actually, this is also my question. So, although I did some work about the integration of visual and vestibular signal, but I starting from that, or the heading direction signal is already there. So I don't know, but I guess is that it may be because for vestibular system, when we think is a force, so that's why it comes to the acceleration. But for me, I also know that vestibular signal is not only acceleration, can also be speed. Am I right, Megan?
Yeah, well, we talked about this in the tutorials a little bit today, where once you've integrated the acceleration signal, it kind of comes to represent velocity in that way. And so, yeah, it can, like, the result of integrating the instantaneous vestibular signal ends up being a representation of speed. And so now it's going from, like, this is voltage, this is a representation of acceleration, this is a representation of speed, because the brain is able to do all that.
But the raw signal can't be speed, isn't it? Because we can't perceive speed if we move with a constant speed. So
Yeah.
It's only acceleration we can perceive in physics.
Yeah, so it's like the interpretation or the inference that the brain does as a result of having integrated the vestibular signal ends up being this kind of abstract representation of speed. Yeah. Cool. All right, let's do the next one then. All right, why does increasing the window size shift the curves? Oh yeah, we've got some answers too. I think what this is referring to is the sliding window approach, right? The idea that changing the size of the window in the moving average, the sliding average, changes the way that the curves look. And so this is really, it's just you're averaging over a larger area or a larger period of time. And so that's going to end up, yeah, exactly, the moving average is going to end up shifting the way they kind of look on the screen, but it's not going to end up shifting, of course, the underlying data. It's just kind of a computational convenience that we do, or that we assume maybe the brain is doing, that it's changing the size of the window of this smoothing or something like that to kind of maximally get rid of the noise, so to speak. Do you guys have any follow-ups on that? No? Okay.
Well,
cool.
I think it's not, so did we only introduce the rectangular window yet? I watched the tutorial, but I did not pay attention to all the details of the...
Oh, for the moving average. Yeah, I think it's just a rectangular window, and you guys can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I think it really is just like, here's this window of time, and we're just going to average here, and then we're going to move it, and then we're going to move it, and that kind of thing. So there's no like tapering, I believe, in the smoothing. I think it's a little early to talk about that in terms of the signal processing, in terms of the length of the school, but that's actually kind of an interesting point, right? That the way that, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, I think you guys should pay attention to the fact that if you use a rectangular window, then there's something unrealistic. That it means at some point, you actually know information from the future, not only from the past. So it's a kind of data analysis techniques.
Yeah, and there's like different things you can do with the sliding window. So I imagine that a bunch of the students who are taking Neuromatch Academy right now, who are taking this course, are coming from more like electrical engineering or mechanical engineering backgrounds, in addition to the neuroscience backgrounds. And so for those of you in the room who have signal processing background, you probably know a lot about filtering of signals and all the different kinds of like smoothing techniques and averaging that you guys can do to get rid of that noise. Cool. And again, see, I apologize for continuing to mute you. No, nothing personal. Okay. So in section 2, could you specify how the vestibular signal is being integrated? Yeah. Oh, hang on. The questions have all just jumped around. So we'll answer this one first, and then we've got a bunch of upvotes for another one. But yeah, this is a great question and a great answer. Like that, we can just say it's actually literally just mathematical integration, just like you would do in your first level calculus course. So that's what we're doing there. Okay,
So what's the question? Did it mean like we as investigators, how we do that, or the brain, how the brain does that?
Okay. I like your interpretation of the question better. Let's do that. It's not about the math, right? It's about how is the brain able to integrate
how's the
these
brain?
signals. Yeah. Okay. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think Si probably has a better answer.
No, I actually have no idea. Yeah. I don't know the detail how the brain do that. I have no idea.
I think that well, if the vestibular system works similar to the visual motion system, like the system in like when you go from early visual cortex through medial temporal lobe and then into like lateral interparietal cortex or something similar, and we talk about this in like dot motion, right? And you talk about like the ocular motor system, the holy trinity of eye movements, which is the lateral interparietal cortex, the superior colliculus, and the frontal eye fields. And these areas of the brain for the visual system, we assume have what we call like accumulation neurons, where they have like self-recurrent activity, and they kind of integrate signal over time. And so I would imagine that the vestibular system, which I don't know a huge amount about, but the vestibular system might have a similar mechanism. And so maybe we can eventually get someone in here who actually studies the vestibular system instead of us. I'm a vision scientist by training, so that's where my expertise lies, and multisensory integration, but not visual vestibular, like visual haptic and audio visual.
Oh, sorry. So could I ask how an artificial system, neural circuits, can do the integration? What are the alternative ways to do the integration?
Yeah, I think in general, if a neuron has some time constant, and also the connection okay, basically put in such a way, basically if you have some acceleration, you have your speed, acceleration as input, speed as output, then you can always train a neural network by choosing the time constant of neuron properly and the connection weights properly, then you can achieve it. So in principle, mathematically is not difficult things, but the difficulty may be unclear things where it happens and how exactly the brain does that.
Yeah. And I think also what's interesting is that like the idea of how the brain does this versus like where in the brain this is happening. These are two separate questions, right? So you can come up with this mechanistic. We talked yesterday about like what, how, and why models. So you can come up with this like how model explanation. And then you can go fishing in the brain and you can see, does this area of the brain have that mechanism or not? And then there's this whole debate now about whether these accumulation neurons that we think we've found are actually
Is it okay? Han, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. But the Megan is disappear.
I'm here.
Okay.
All right. Maybe we're back.
Okay.
All right. Let's try it. Okay. This happened yesterday. Apparently, Crowdcast is not as stable as we thought. Okay. So let's move on then. Better recovery than yesterday, huh, guys? Okay. All right. So let's move on now to our next question. Oh, this is a great question. Can you guys see this? What if we have several models sharing the same behavioral prediction power? How can we select the one that's closest to our brain? Oh, this is a great question. You guys want to take this? I can talk for hours about this question. But you guys go first. What do you think? How can we pick the best one? We've got some answers in the chat too, which are, Occam's razor, but yeah. What do you think?
Okay. First question. The first thing I think we should check is whether these several models
Yeah, that came up yesterday too, and I think that's going to be a recurring theme. Is the standard? All models are wrong, but some are useful. But it's totally true. Yeah. I really like what you said about the fact that we can use neural data to arbitrate, so that you have these two predictions about which mechanisms and which constraints, which loss functions are the ones that are important, and two models that described data equally well. And sometimes what you have to do is you have to go fishing in the brain and see which one actually is the mechanism that is the right one. All right. So, C, do you have anything that you want to add to this? Let's see if I can fix the sound while we're
Basically the same, that the first step you say whether you can reproduce the known experiment result. The second thing you say whether it can give new prediction. But there are some times that because the brain is so complicated, sometimes you don't know. There's not enough experiment data to judge whether the model is correct or not. Then this you have to base on your belief. So I think the pretty is very important. So the model is pretty, simple, elegant, neat, and also sometimes make me feel, oh, this model should be correct. And this always happens. And in particular in physics, that's pretty the model, the success model, like the Newton equation or Einstein's general relativity, are very pretty. So the model pretty is also sometimes if you don't have enough experiment data, sometimes at least makes me to believe, oh, this model must be correct. The brain must be working such a way. Okay.
Yeah, we've talked about that too, that like sometimes beauty is a reasonable goal, and we can go that way too. Yeah.
Okay.
Could I add one word? Yeah, I think like so like model testing or
Definitely. All right. Cool. So unfortunately, we are still working on the sound issue, guys. We don't have a lot of control over that. I'm really sorry. We'll see if maybe Hung, if you want to try reloading again. I don't know. We can try it. We'll just reload the page and we'll try that. Yeah. All right. So let's go on and see if we can pick a different question here. Oh, we've got a couple good ones here. What do we think? C, there's two that are near the top. One is very technical, one is very philosophical. Do you have a preference? We've got the major difference or major difficulties between modeling neural data versus biological data on the one hand versus like human behavioral data, multi-banded choices. What do you think? You want to take that one?
Let me think about it. The question is quite long, so. Okay, so if my understanding is correct, so the question is about the modeling neuron data and modeling behavior data. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
seems
I
to be.
think the modeling neuron data, typically when you do this kind of stuff, you will come to down to the neuron and their connections. So you build up a network model. You will, and also your reproducing behavior is typically the neurophysiological behavior and also some prediction of also about neural recording data. But when you model the behaviors, so the model is more like conceptual level. So you may define some units and there are connections and to do something, or even using some probability model, some Bayesian, you don't have to specify how the neural circuit is actually to implement it. So these two type of model is very different. One is down to kind of implementation level, neuron circuits, and another is on the conceptual level. Is to more like kind of descriptive. It's all in the Mars view is like kind of the top level description level, but the neural data is more to the implementation level.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about MAR yesterday, where we introduced the how, what, why kind of distinction between models, and then we also talked about different like layers of abstraction from like neurons all the way up to like people and societies, and then we also talked about MAR's 3 levels of analysis and how all of these are great ways of kind of describing what your model is good for and also what it's not good for. I think I'll add to that, though, that for me, I find that modeling, if you're trying to do like an implementation level model, there are ways in which what you're trying to model is in some ways a little bit more concrete. You can see a neuron spiking, you can, or not spiking, you can see like a synaptic current or measure it like with these kinds of instruments that we've developed. But like trying to get at cognitive effects, trying to get at, the example given in the question is this like multi-armed bandit problem. Like, oh man, like the kind of decision-making processes that you're getting at when you're trying to understand what a human is doing when they're trying to navigate a multi-armed bandit. I think that's really like fascinating, but it's also really hard. And so we've got a much less direct line into what the thing is that we're trying to measure, I think, in a lot of ways when we're trying to get to like human behavior. Even when you're trying to do human behavior as simple as like pressing buttons, like here, I show you a thing on the screen, are the dots going that way or that way? Like there's a whole lot of stuff going on underneath the hood in the decision to press like the button for the dots going that way or the button for the dots going that way. Like, what do you see, A or B? So that would be, I think, my follow-up there is like, this is the kind of main distinction that I see between modeling neural data, biological data versus like human behavior data. Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we've permanently or semi-permanently lost Hong, which is terrible. Sorry, guys. Oh, yay, we're back. Wonderful. Nothing like reloading to get rid of the tech difficulties. And now we keep, for me at least, we keep switching places. I don't know if you guys see that too. So
and switching browsers.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear Hong now? Hopefully that's the case. So they've got a little bit of a delay. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So we've got some more questions to deal with. This is fun. So let's do the next one. So does the model we learned in today's tutorial suggest that the vestibular signal will be denoised through some brain areas when integrated with the visual signals? Or like the auditory system, which also uses these hair cells to sense the route from the hair cells to the thalamus to the cortex, and the vestibular system is responsible for some process like denoising. So basically, is there a thing in the brain, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is there a spot in the brain or a system in the brain that's doing something that functions like this moving average, so to speak? What do you guys think? Any decision points, any thoughts on that? I think that there has to be, right? That there has to be like, I mean, this is one of the things that we think that, well, so again, I'm going to speak in the visual system because I'm a vision scientist, but this is one of the things that we think lateral inhibition and divisive normalization is doing in the visual system. And I think in all the sensory systems is that by having neurons that kind of have opposing tuning preferences, and they inhibit the cells that have tuning preferences that are opposite their own, that kind of ends up averaging out the noise, and that this can also happen across time as well. That we end up with these kinds of divisive normalization kinds of things that end up doing that averaging in time. I don't know where that is in the vestibular system though. See, sometimes, you know, us people with PhDs, we don't know everything. And so I actually don't know where that is in the visual system. Do you guys know? Or in the vestibular system? You guys know?
Actually, I have a question. Is the denoising part necessary in the model? I did not quite get that point. I watched the video. I watched a tutorial video. I'm not sure. Well, I did not think through it, but at first sight, I did not quite understand why denoising the vestibular signal is necessary.
For the
model. So why we need that? Yeah.
You know, I didn't create the tutorials either, so I'm sorry, I don't know. I think, yeah, so we've got some answers in the chat. That's great. So the denoising step, turns out it didn't help because the signal was so noisy to begin with that it's so unreliable from like a cue combination standpoint that the brain ends up, even after you kind of denoise it, it's still just not useful. And so on some level, maybe the brain kind of knows that, or if you believe in like probabilistic population codes or sampling-based kind of ways that neurons can represent probabilities, that on some level, the brain kind of knows how reliable the signal is. And so even averaging a noisy signal doesn't end up helping. Anybody have anything to add?
Yeah, okay, maybe I comment about it. I think this just is a mathematical way to describe what the neuron does. So we say the neuron is doing some information processing. You can using some say, okay, this neuron is extracting some time averaged some futures which is obtained by average over some singulars over time. Or you can also describe, okay, this neuron is actually doing denoising. So basically, I think denoising is kind of terminology. Is a way we try to understand what the neural system does. We're using these mathematical tools. Engineering people has developed denoising, then we use it. But you can also, the same function, you can also, okay, the brain is to extract some info, for example, information over time. So has the same effect of denoising. So the denoising could be, I believe, is always occurs in the neural system. Yeah.
It's kind of a primary goal.
Yeah, otherwise,
Yeah.
if we don't do denoising, basically our neural system will respond to every instant fluctuations. Will be mad, right? We will extract some slow futures, some time invariant futures. Then there will be some denoising behavior going on.
Yeah, this gets into, I think later in the tutorials, we're also maybe going to talk about expected versus unexpected uncertainty. And I believe it's next week on Monday, that is like the whole day on Bayesian inference and Bayesian ideal observers and how the brain deals with probability distributions and stuff like that. And so I think that this stuff is going to come up at that point, which would be great. So guys, stay tuned for that. I think that that'll be really relevant to these types of questions. Cool. Okay. So we've got another question here. Whirl velocity is computed as optic flow signal minus vestibular signal. Basically, it's like the difference between them. This is a mathematical question. Why is there a negative sign before optic flow? I think it's just because of the backwards thing, that you're maybe going in the opposite direction. I think that that's the reason, but I'm not gonna, don't hold me to that because I'd have to go back and look at the code. It's been a little while since I looked at that, sorry. So sorry, we'll have to skip that one for now, but ask your TA actually. Your TA is gonna know much better than we will for that one. Okay, so let's do the next one. Why do we perceive self-motion only by vestibular signals, but not by a combination of visual and sensory signals? I'm not sure what sensory means here, but let's keep going. In our model assumption, we only assume a pure representation of self-motion from vestibular signals, and it proves to work well in the example, but the data or the design is not enough to explain how we perceive self-motion. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so there's like this whole field that is visual-vestibular integration. And like tons of people who work on multisensory integration of visual and vestibular signals and how optic flow relates to self-motion and how it gets integrated with the vestibular signal. And if you guys have not seen these experiments, they basically involve putting a human or a macaque, a monkey, in a chair and moving the chair around and then like shooting dots at you and like trying to make you figure out where you're going. And then moving the dots in ways that they do or do not agree with the vestibular signals. So your vestibular signal from like being in a chair on the end of a robot arm where the chair is going this way and the dots make you, your eyes tell you you're going that way and you see like where your heading direction is going to be. So these are actually really interesting experiments and you guys can go look them up. But I think that's maybe what you mean by this kind of pure representation of self-motion. I don't know that you're ever going to get a pure representation of anything from any sense. I think that the world is multisensory. And so maybe C, you want to follow up on this I know you do multisensory stuff too.
Okay, I agree with you. So self motion is not perceived purely by vestibular singular, but visual singular also provide a cue for self motion. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in fact a pretty reliable signal, right? Like usually when you have optic flow, it's saying that you are moving. Like usually you are the one that's moving, not the world. So there's this idea that you've learned that type of signal from your eyes ends up being a reliable cue for you moving. And so you've learned the kind of association between those things. I'm going to start talking in Bayesian terms if I'm not careful. I got to wait until Bayes Day so that we don't get ahead of ourselves. But there's a whole formalization of how your brain has learned what a particular signal is likely to tell you about the world. And you have these kinds of prior expectations, and then you do the Bayesian inference and you come up with the answer. So I love that we're asking these questions, though. These are like, hold these questions in your mind for like 6 more days, and then you can learn how to do it next Monday. It'll be great.
Could I just add one sentence about this question?
Yeah.
So I think what we were doing to model the train illusion is a very simple model. It must be some simplification of how the brain works. So example that how we can model it in a very simple way. So some of its assumption must be simpler than the real reality. So that's why we just treat like sensory as one input, the vestibular system as one input, and the visual system as another input. Yeah, that doesn't mean we don't think there could be more complicated ways. Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's where we start with.
Exactly. And the tutorial today showed that when we do this massive oversimplification, that the model doesn't quite work right. That it doesn't quite actually get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like perfect. It shows that, you can simplify it down and it gets some things right. And maybe that gives you a really interesting answer, a really interesting story. And that's fantastic. And you've learned what you want. But it also means that, as you guys saw in the outro video too, that there's like that crazy flow chart that Gunnar put up, where it's like, it's not just like, oh, come up with a hypothesis and then like do some cute experiments and then like test your model and then write it up and like, then you're done. Yay. And then just go back to the beginning. That's not how it works. Usually.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, I like that. It's not like very beginning we have the best model we have in the world, that we start with something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's a real world.
And then you take your simple model and you start adding stuff to it. And so one of my favorite ways to add to some of these kinds of integration models is to add the idea of causal inference into it, where your brain has to decide, like, should I integrate these signals or not? Or should I segregate them? And so some of actually Conrad, some of his earlier work, like back in 2007, I think, was done with my PhD advisor, and then I followed up on some of that stuff in my PhD, and we did some causal inference and multisensory integration, and so this is one of my favorite questions to think about: is that the brain is constantly like deciding not just how do I put these things together, but like, should I even do that? And it all happens under the hood. Like, you don't make that decision. Your brain does it for you.
The beauty of modeling, I think, is to explore. It gives you the opportunity to explore many, many parallel worlds. Like, they are potentially possible, but there's only one universe, the universe we live in.
Oh, now you're turning into a philosopher. Have you read any of Don Hoffman's work where he thinks that, maybe the outside world is nothing like what we perceive? It's a convenient illusion. But, we should all be philosophers at heart, I think. Cool. Okay. So we have a double question here. The next question that's up is the same as before. So I'm going to skip that one. We've got a question about day one material, which I am going to refer you to your TAs because I think that they will do a better job answering that. But this question, if you don't get this question asked or answered to your satisfaction, please actually like message. You know what? I'm going to tell you, message Conrad on Twitter and he will answer it for you. And you can tell him I sent you. Okay, this question about the Poisson neuron and the exponential distribution ISIs. Tell Conrad that I sent you, and he has to answer you on Twitter. Okay, and then we've got a couple others. They keep jumping around. Let's see. Can Bayesian inference be used as a tool for transforming sensation to perception, such as vestibular and visual signals in tutorials or inputs to sensation? How to build mathematical expressions to go from sensation to perception. Well, I know how I might answer this, but I'm going to allow you guys to talk a little bit if you guys want to about the distinction between sensation and perception, if there is one. No?
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether it's a real. There is any real differentiation between sensation and perception. It's probably not a real question. It's just an illusion.
Well, I think maybe the difference or the way that I interpret this question, and maybe, you know, whoever asked this question, Rebecca, it looks like if I'm getting this wrong, please tell me in the chat. But this kind of, I interpret this as like the difference between when we encode a sensory signal in like early visual cortex versus like what we see. And so if you see like a visual illusion, at what point in your brain does the visual illusion bit emerge? Can you see that all the way down at the level of the retina? Well, probably not. Can you see it in LGN? Probably not. But then like after that, it starts to get a little fuzzier because then you end up with like lateral inhibition and other kinds of, you know, factors ending, depending on the visual illusion, of course. So like the line is blurred then between sensation and perception. And then of course the whole subjective aspect of perception as well, which maybe we don't need to get into here. Then that's the philosopher of me talking. I like talking about, you know, consciousness and subjective perception and all that stuff. So do we think that Bayesian inference can be used as a tool for transforming sensation to perception? That's a pretty concrete question. What do you think? Yes, no. Ooh, maybe we can do a poll.
Okay, so maybe I say something about this. Because the Bayesian inference is a very general framework. Its emphasis on that how the priorology is integrated to influence the probabilistic inference. So you suppose that you have a backbone to which can map anything from input to output, and above on this you add in some noise to introduce some probability, then and priorology. Then you come to Bayesian inference. So in this sense, Bayesian inference can fit everything. So that's why it can be a tool. It's maybe rather than the question could be more specific. How Bayesian inference can be a better rule for us to understand from sensation to perception. I think that if the question asked is this a way, then I will answer that it could be is a very is a proper tool because the Bayesian inference emphasizes on the priorology, and when we transform from sensation to perception, priorology plays a very important role. That's where the most illusion comes from. Okay, yeah, that's my answer.
You can see what the audience thinks too. Do they think that Bayesian inference can be used as a tool for transforming sensation to perception? Oh, we've got some people agreeing. Yes, no? Come on, guys. Don't be shy. Yeah, I think I like your answer. Thanks. Yeah. So maybe people think yes, no, but this is kind of a bigger philosophical question that it's not just about like, can Bayesian inference be used to describe why we make the perceptual decisions that we do, or to be able to capture or predict the perceptual decisions that we make, but like, is this actually what the brain is doing? So bigger questions. Keep going on the poll, guys. I want to see where you go with that. All right, so it's midnight 01 for me here in California. So we will do maybe one more question here. Does that sound good? And then you guys can go and run off to your social hubs. I don't know I hope those are working for you guys. We've got these little virtual rooms set up so you can go wander around and talk to each other in the era of COVID and quarantine. Let's do one more. I was surprised that the train illusion doesn't collapse after a second or two. In real data, do we find that participants resolve their erroneous motion perception after a few seconds, even if the sensory inputs are constant? Having never been in an experimental setting for this or run one of these myself, I actually don't know the answer to that. Do you guys know if the train illusion or other erroneous kind of motion illusions would collapse after a second or two?
No, I have no idea. I think it's an empirical question.
Yeah.
My experience never collapsed. So I have this experience a long time ago when I take a train to my hometown. I was very tired, and I will feel that the train is moving. I'm not sure whether my train is moving or the train beside me is moving. I think hard. I still cannot solve this. Which one is moving? Then what I do, I will look at the ground. I will outside of the train. I will immediately say, which train is really moving. I think our brain doesn't solve this, even though the sensory input is constant. Is because maybe it's because of prior or something. So this prior is also constant. So you will never, the base in posterior is constant. So you cannot solve it. You have some extra cue to break this break this illusion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way I would answer too. And this also goes into this idea of expected versus unexpected uncertainty and kind of the stability of the environment. So that, once your brain has decided, or you have decided that you are moving and the train next to you is not the thing, the environment is not the thing that's moving, why would the world suddenly qualitatively shift? It wouldn't. Because generally speaking, like, the world doesn't suddenly shift to a completely different configuration. The world is fairly stable from one moment to the next, and your brain knows this. And so once it comes up with, one interpretation, it's really hard to break that. And this is true for a lot of other visual illusions as well. I maybe you guys have seen the dancer illusion, the spinning dancer, where you can make her turn the other way, or it's like, motion from structure from motion. Where you have like the ball that kind of made of dots that looks this way, but then you can get it to flip so that it turns the other way. But it's really hard to make them flip. Once you see it going one way, it's really hard to make it flip in your mind. And I think this is kind of a similar kind of thing, that once the world has one interpretation, why would it suddenly flip? Because it never does that in the real world. It only happens in experiments.
Or it depends on whether our brain has any opportunity to collect new data.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If there's a new piece of data, absolutely. Then that's a whole new thing. Now you make a new inference and you say, oh, I have new information that I need to integrate into my percept. Yeah. Cool. Okay, guys. Well, it's midnight 05 for me. I think that we didn't get to a lot of questions here. Sorry, guys. But I think in the interest of not dragging this out too much, we could speed through a bunch here if we wanted to. We might stick around in the chat afterwards. But if you didn't get a chance to ask your questions or get your questions answered here, do take them back to your pods tomorrow. Take them into the Mozilla hubs and wander around and chat science with each other in your little avatars. This is the best part of a summer school. for the summer schools that are in person, is to actually like sit down and have a conversation about science. So try to use this time to do that, and take these questions back to your TAs tomorrow and to your pods, and see if you guys want to chat about them there. So I think that's probably it for tonight. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for hanging out and chatting. This has been really fun. So do you have any parting words for the rest of the students here before we sign off? No? About models, how awesome models are?
Well, I didn't know it's so much fun to answer questions.
It is fun. It is fun to answer questions, to talk about science. This is like my favorite thing, right? Is to sit around and just talk about science and models with people. I do this in my free time, which I think makes me kind of a crazy person, but you know. All right, cool. Well, it has been great. We had fewer tech challenges than yesterday, so that's awesome. Maybe the system is catching up with us. So it was really nice to meet both of you. Thank you for chatting. And I haven't looked at the schedule, but if you're signed up for any of the other Q&As, they will probably be similar to this one. And we'll get to answer lots more fun questions from all of the students. Okay. All right, guys. Well, that's it. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.